Aquarius, there's a moment in life when someone doesn't miss your words, they miss your presence. And that's when it happens. They finally understand you, not because you explained yourself, but because you were no longer there holding everything together. This is the story of someone who realized your value in silence and felt it so deeply that they took your name home and spoke about you to their mother. Not out of impulse, but out of clarity. If you've ever been the one who loved quietly, gave consistently, and wondered how did they not see this? This message is already touching you. Speech balloon before we continue. Comment I receive. If you're ready to hear this message with an open heart. Because what comes next isn't about chasing love, it's about understanding why this connection changed them from the inside out. Pause, gentle breath. Let me take you there. Aquarius, stay with me for a moment. There's something quiet I want to say to you. Something that doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives the way truth always does, softly, when no one is trying to prove anything anymore. You see, for a long time, you were the steady one, the calm presence, the person who adjusted without announcing it. You made space. You listened. You held the emotional weight so lightly that no one realized how heavy it actually was. And then one day you didn't, not as a strategy, not as a lesson, but because something in you finally exhaled. That's when the silence changed shape. They didn't hear your voice echoing anymore. They didn't feel that quiet reassurance that used to soften their days. The room still looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. And for the first time, they had to sit with themselves. Aquarius, have you ever noticed how some people only understand warmth after the temperature drops? They didn't miss your explanations. They missed the way things worked when you were there, the way life felt more navigable, the way they felt more grounded without knowing why. And that realization didn't come with drama. It came with a pause, a strange, uncomfortable pause where they suddenly saw the difference between presence and absence. That's when the truth landed, not as guilt, not as regret yet, but as awareness. You weren't just someone who stayed. You were someone who stabilized. Someone who offered emotional safety without demanding recognition for it. And here's the part I want you to hear closely. This understanding didn't happen because you disappeared to be noticed. It happened because you stopped abandoning yourself to remain familiar. That shift, that subtle reclaiming of your own space, it changed the entire emotional gravity of the connection. Aquarius, you carry a rare kind of energy. You love with intelligence, with restraint, with a quiet hope that people will meet you without you having to explain the map. But when that energy steps back even slightly, it leaves a vacuum that cannot be filled with distractions. That's when they realized what had been holding everything together. And maybe, just maybe, this is why their understanding feels different now. Because it wasn't taught, it was felt. Clarity often comes to others only after you choose clarity for yourself. This moment, this realization they're sitting with, it's not the end of a story. It's the doorway. A doorway into a deeper awareness. Into conversations that aren't performative. Into choices that finally carry weight. And as we move forward together, you'll begin to see how this quiet understanding didn't just change how they see you. It changed how they speak about you. Aquarius, there's something tender I want to walk through with you now. Not loudly, not sharply, but in the way understanding often unfolds layer by layer, without blame. You see, the reason they didn't recognize your value earlier was never about intelligence, and it certainly wasn't about vision. It was about timing inside the soul. Some people grow emotionally the way cities do, slow, uneven, built around comfort before meaning. They learned how to receive before they learned how to recognize, how to be held before they understood what holding truly costs. And you, Aquarius, you offered something rare. You offered steadiness without control, care without ownership, presence without keeping score. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand applause. It simply becomes the environment. And here's the quiet truth most people don't like to admit. When something feels constant, the untrained heart mistakes it for permanence. They didn't pause to ask how much energy it took for you to remain kind while being misunderstood. They didn't wonder how much strength it required to stay gentle without reassurance. They just assumed you would always know how to adjust. Aquarius, you have a way of making emotional labor look effortless. And because of that, people sometimes forget that effort is still effort even when it's done with grace. They weren't cruel. They were unfinished, still learning the difference between comfort and connection, between convenience and care, between someone who fills space and someone who shapes a life. And loss has a way of accelerating growth in people who resisted reflection. When your energy shifted, when your presence stopped cushioning their edges, they felt the absence of something they had never named before. Not because you disappeared, but because you stopped overextending. And suddenly, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was revealing. They began to notice how often you had been the bridge, how often you softened moments they never had to face directly. And here's where it becomes important for you, Aquarius. Their late realization does not mean your worth arrived late. Your value existed fully long before they were capable of meeting it. Sometimes people don't fail to see us. They fail to see themselves standing next to something real. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever noticed how people only understand depth after they've tried to replace it with noise? This phase of the story is not about judgment. It's about perspective, about recognizing that maturity isn't guaranteed by age. It's earned through discomfort, through reflection, through moments that force the heart to slow down. And as this awareness settles into them, something else begins to shift. Their understanding becomes quieter, more careful, less performative. Because once someone realizes they were held by something genuine, they become more mindful of how they speak about it. And that awareness, it doesn't stay inside them. It seeks a place to land. Aquarius, there's a different kind of feeling in the air now. Not heavy, not sharp, but unmistakably real. It begins quietly, with a tightening in the chest they can't explain. A sense that something essential is no longer within reach, and no amount of distraction seems to soften it. This isn't jealousy. It isn't competition. It isn't the fear of someone else stepping in. It's something older than that. Something instinctive. It's the fear of knowing they may never again encounter a presence that felt as honest as yours. They start to notice it in ordinary moments. When something good happens and there's no one to share it with in the same way. When something difficult arises and the usual emotional anchor is gone. And suddenly, the world feels a little less steady. Aquarius, have you ever sensed when someone realizes they didn't just lose a relationship, they lost a way of being understood? That's the fear that wakes them. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet one that settles in late at night when there's nothing left to outrun. They begin to replay moments differently. Not with regret yet, but with curiosity. Why did it feel so easy with you? Why did you never ask them to become smaller? Why did your care never come with a price tag? And this is where the truth becomes unavoidable. They recognize that what you offered was not performance, not control, not emotional leverage. It was choice. You chose consistency. You chose fairness. You chose to love without conditions in a world that often confuses love with strategy. That realization lands hard because it can't be replicated on demand. Aquarius, you don't love loudly, you love consciously. And when that kind of love steps back, it doesn't create chaos. It creates awareness. The fear they feel now isn't about losing access to you. It's about losing the version of themselves that existed when you were present. The calmer version, the more grounded one, the person who didn't have to armor up. And so they're forced inward, to look at the patterns they avoided, the emotional shortcuts they relied on, the ways they mistook your steadiness for something that would always be there. Let me ask you something gently, Aquarius. Have you noticed how fear can sometimes be the first honest emotion a person allows themselves to feel? This fear isn't meant to punish them. It's meant to wake them up, to show them that connection isn't guaranteed, that emotional safety is rare, that people like you don't appear often and don't stay where they are taken for granted. And as this fear settles, it begins to reshape their priorities. They become quieter, more reflective, less interested in appearances and more concerned with substance. Because once someone realizes they may never find another presence like yours, they stop speaking casually about it. They start treating it as something sacred. And that fear, that moment of recognition, doesn't stay locked inside them. It searches for grounding, for guidance, for a place where truth feels safe enough to be spoken. And slowly, almost without realizing it, they turn toward home. Aquarius, this is where the energy softens. Not because the story becomes smaller, but because it becomes more intimate. After that quiet reckoning settles in them, they don't rush outward. They don't announce anything. They don't seek validation from the world. Instead, something very human happens. They go inward, toward familiarity, toward the place where truth is spoken without performance. Home. You see, when someone reaches a certain emotional age, they stop needing applause for who they care about. They start needing alignment. And so your name is spoken not in excitement, but in reverence. Not as a headline, but as a confession. They speak about you to their mother because she represents memory, history, the part of life that remembers who they were before they learned how to hide. Aquarius, have you noticed how people only bring what truly matters to the spaces that shape them? This isn't about permission. It never was. It's about saying, quietly, I've met someone who changed how I move through the world. Someone who didn't demand improvement, but inspired it. Someone whose presence didn't feel chaotic, but clarifying. And when they speak, their voice slows. They don't exaggerate you. They don't romanticize you. They describe how they feel calmer now, more thoughtful, less reactive. They mention how being around you made them want to be fairer, kinder, more honest with themselves. And the mother listens, not just with her ears, but with her intuition. Because mothers know the difference between infatuation and grounding, between desire and direction. She hears the shift in tone, the way certainty doesn't need to prove itself, the way love, when real, sounds quieter than fantasy. Aquarius, this moment carries more weight than you might realize. When someone brings your name into that space, they are placing you inside their sense of legacy, inside the question of who they are becoming. They are saying, without saying it, this is someone I respect. This is someone I don't want to mishandle. And that matters. Because respect is the language of long-lasting connection. Let me ask you something softly. Have you ever noticed how the people who truly value you don't talk about you loudly, they talk about you carefully? This conversation isn't rushed. It doesn't seek approval. It seeks understanding. And in that understanding, something subtle begins to form. A bridge between who they were and who they want to be. Between the life they came from and the life they're considering building. Aquarius, your energy doesn't disrupt families, it recalibrates them. You don't arrive as chaos, you arrive as clarity. And when that clarity is spoken aloud in a place that holds generations of truth, it changes how the connection is held. Not publicly, not dramatically, but with care, with intention, with the awareness that this is not something to rush or misuse or take lightly. And as that realization settles into the room, it begins to ripple outward, shaping how they show up, how they speak, how they choose. Because once your name has been spoken there, nothing about this connection remains casual. Aquarius, there is a quieter layer beneath everything you've just felt. It doesn't announce itself. It waits. Patient, watchful. When your name enters that room, something ancient stirs in the heart of the mother listening. Not suspicion, not judgment, memory. She has lived long enough to know that love can be beautiful and still be dangerous. She has seen devotion turn into debt, promises turn into paperwork. Hands that once held each other become weapons in courtrooms and kitchens. So when she listens, she isn't measuring your charm. She's listening for something else entirely. She listens for intent. Aquarius, have you ever noticed how mothers don't fear people, they fear patterns? She remembers the friends who trusted too easily, the marriages that looked perfect in photographs and collapsed under the weight of resentment and money. The quiet betrayals no one talks about until years later. This is the lens she brings to the conversation. And this is why her attention sharpens when your name is spoken. Not because she doubts you, but because she understands what is at stake. She watches how her child speaks about you. The pauses, the softness, the lack of bravado. She notices that you aren't described as someone who takes, but as someone who steadies, someone who doesn't rush outcomes, someone who doesn't create urgency, someone who doesn't need to be owed. That matters to her. Because fear doesn't relax for perfection, it relaxes for sincerity. Aquarius, you carry a kind of integrity that doesn't try to impress authority. And authority can feel that. You don't angle for advantage. You don't love as a transaction. You don't attach yourself to futures that aren't aligned with your values. And the mother senses this not through words but through the absence of red flags. She hears no hunger in the story. No manipulation. No agenda hiding behind affection. Only presence. Only care. Only a calm that suggests nothing is being forced. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever realized that the safest people are often the ones who don't need to secure anything? That realization is what begins to soften her. Because what she fears most is not heartbreak. It is exploitation. It is watching her child give their life energy to someone who sees love as leverage. And in the way you are spoken about, she doesn't hear that danger. She hears balance. She hears someone who would walk away rather than misuse power. Someone who would speak truth rather than accumulate advantage. That is why her questions are careful, measured, sometimes quiet. She isn't testing you. She is protecting a future she has already seen break once before. And slowly, as the conversation continues, something in her chest loosens. Not because she has decided to trust blindly, but because she recognizes that you are not arriving with hidden hands. Aquarius, this is a rare moment. When fear doesn't disappear but transforms. When vigilance turns into respect. Because when someone realizes that your presence brings safety rather than risk, they stop bracing. They start listening. And in that softened space, a new kind of protection begins to form. Not protection against you, but protection for what you represent. Because people who love without hidden motives are precious. And once that is understood, nothing about how this connection is held will ever be careless again. Aquarius, something changes now. Not in a dramatic way. Not with declarations or promises that try to convince you. It changes in the smallest, most telling places. You feel it in the timing, in the way messages arrive when they say they will, in how plans are made without hesitation, in how you are no longer left holding uncertainty alone. There is a calm precision to it, almost quiet, almost understated, and that is how you know it's real. Because when someone has truly been moved, they stop performing emotion and start practicing responsibility. You are no longer met with intensity that burns out quickly. You are met with steadiness, with follow-through, with the kind of presence that doesn't need to be announced. Aquarius, have you ever noticed how maturity sounds softer than passion, but lasts longer? They don't rush you now. They don't keep you guessing. They don't disappear into silence and return with excuses. Instead, they show up in the ordinary moments, the unglamorous ones, the ones that actually build a life. There is no spectacle in this shift. No grand gesture trying to erase the past, just a different rhythm. They listen without interrupting. They remember what matters to you. They respect your time as if it holds value. And it does. You feel less tension in your body around them, less need to stay alert, less emotional labor spent translating what you need. Because for the first time, you are not carrying the connection alone. Aquarius, this is important. Consistency is not boring. It is brave. It means someone has decided to be accountable for the energy they bring into your life. And accountability is where love becomes safe. They don't overwhelm you with words now. They let actions speak in their natural language. You are no longer wondering where you stand. You are no longer trying to read between lines that should never have existed. There is clarity. And clarity feels like relief. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time someone made you feel calm instead of anxious about being loved? This shift doesn't ask you to chase. It doesn't ask you to prove anything. It meets you where you are and says without saying it, I am here. You don't have to work so hard anymore. Aquarius, you were never meant to convince someone to stay present. Your nature is too expansive for that. You thrive when love feels like partnership, not pursuit. And this version of them understands that now. They begin to mirror your integrity, your respect for time, your preference for honesty over intensity, not because you demanded it, but because they finally saw what it cost you to offer it freely. This is not the beginning of fireworks. It is the beginning of trust. And trust grows quietly. It grows in how consistently someone chooses you when there is no audience. As this steadiness settles in, you may notice something else. You breathe more easily. You speak more openly. You stop bracing for disappointment. Because your nervous system recognizes safety before your mind ever does. Aquarius, this is the kind of change that doesn't rush ahead. It walks beside you. And as you move forward together, step by step, you'll begin to feel how this consistency does more than reassure you. It reshapes the foundation of what you now know love can be. Aquarius, there is a quiet turn here. So subtle you could almost miss it if you weren't listening with your whole body. It happens not in conversation, but in posture, in energy, in what no longer needs to be questioned. The mother's gaze changes, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough for the room to feel different. She is no longer watching you to assess risk. She is no longer measuring outcomes in her mind. Instead, something settles, relief. Because what she has been sensing all along finally has a shape. Aquarius, have you ever felt the moment when someone stops evaluating you and starts including you? That is what this is. She recognizes that your presence does not pull her child away from themselves. It doesn't distort their values. It doesn't rush them into decisions driven by fear or hunger. You don't make them reckless. You make them more grounded. And to a mother who has seen life unfold in painful chapters that matters more than romance ever could, her protection shifts quietly. Before, it was outward, guarding her child from what might harm them. Now, it becomes something else, guarding what feels right. She notices how you hold space without needing control, how you speak without diminishing, how you listen without collecting leverage. Aquarius, this is the kind of trust that is never given lightly. It is earned through absence of threat, through consistency of character, through the calm confidence of someone who has nothing to hide. And so, without announcement, you are no longer an outsider passing through. You are someone whose well-being matters, someone whose intentions are assumed to be clean, someone whose voice carries weight. She does not hover anymore. She does not question quietly from a distance. She begins to advocate not loudly, but firmly. If a line is crossed, she notices. If your needs are overlooked, she feels it. Because she understands something fundamental now. You are not a distraction from her child's path. You are part of what keeps them aligned with it. Let me ask you something gently, Aquarius. Have you ever noticed how the deepest forms of acceptance arrive without ceremony? This is not approval that seeks gratitude. It is alignment that feels natural. You are no longer introduced as an attachment. You are spoken of as a presence, not someone her child is dating, someone her child is becoming more themselves around, and that changes the tone of everything. Conversations soften, assumptions dissolve, defensiveness disappears. You can feel it in the air. There is less testing, less tension, less quiet resistance. In its place, there is a kind of steady backing that does not waver easily. Aquarius, you did not earn this by proving anything. You earned it by being consistent in who you are, by not forcing belonging, by not demanding loyalty, by not trying to secure a position. You simply showed up whole, and when that is recognized, protection transforms into partnership. She does not just trust you, she trusts what you represent. Integrity, balance, emotional safety. This is the moment where the foundation deepens, not because anyone decided it should, but because it could not remain shallow any longer. And as you stand in this quieter, more solid space, you may feel something shift inside you too, a sense of being held without being owned, seen without being scrutinized. Aquarius, this is what it feels like when you are no longer on trial. This is what it feels like when trust has quietly chosen you. Aquarius, take a breath with me here. This is where the story grows quieter again, not because there is less meaning, but because the meaning has finally settled where it belongs. You were never meant to hear this as a promise, and you were never meant to hear it as hope directed outward. This story does not exist to pull you back into waiting. It exists to return you to yourself. Somewhere along the way, you may have learned to question your own impact, to wonder if being calm, fair, emotionally honest was somehow not enough in a world that celebrates intensity over integrity. But listen to me now, Aquarius. Nothing about you was ever the problem. Your steadiness did not make you invisible. Your patience did not make you replaceable. Your depth did not make you difficult to love. It simply required someone capable of meeting it. And here is the truth most people learn late in life. The right connection does not create anxiety. It creates presence. You do not feel the need to perform. You do not feel the need to compete. You do not feel the need to prove that you deserve to be chosen. You are felt. You are considered. You are protected in the ways that matter. Aquarius, have you noticed how your body knows when something is aligned before your mind catches up? That is your wisdom. The moment someone truly understands you, they stop asking you to explain yourself. They stop asking you to shrink your needs. They stop asking you to carry the emotional load alone. They begin to adjust, not loudly, not dramatically, but reliably. And if you ever find yourself wondering whether someone has truly seen you, do not listen for words. Watch the way they show up when there is nothing to gain. Watch the way they protect your peace instead of testing your patience. Watch whether your nervous system relaxes or stays on alert. That is where truth lives. This story is not an ending, and it is not a guarantee. It is a reminder that you are not here to convince someone of your worth. You are here to recognize when it is already understood. And if someone does change after seeing you clearly, that change will be visible in behavior, not intention. In consistency, not chemistry. In accountability, not emotion. Aquarius, you are not difficult to love. You are specific. And the people meant to walk beside you will not make you feel like a question mark. They will treat you like a decision they are willing to stand behind. As this story closes its circle, I want to leave you with one gentle question. What would shift in your life if you stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing what feels safe, steady, and real? Let that question sit with you. Not to rush you, not to push you, but to remind you that the deepest connections do not require effort to sustain. They require alignment. And when alignment is present, nothing needs to be chased. It simply remains. Aquarius, you were never meant to be understood by everyone. Only by the ones who know what to do with a heart like yours. Aquarius, before you go, stay with me just a little longer. If this message found you tonight, it wasn't by accident. It arrived the way truth often does in your life, quietly, at the exact moment your heart was ready to hear it. You've just walked through a story that wasn't meant to convince you of anything. It was meant to remind you of what your soul already knows. That your presence matters. That your steadiness changes rooms. That when someone truly understands you, they don't hesitate, they align. And maybe the surprise here is not that someone finally saw you, but that you stayed soft long enough to let yourself be seen without losing who you are. Aquarius, you carry a rare frequency. One that doesn't rush love, doesn't chase certainty, and doesn't trade integrity for attention. And the people meant for you will feel that immediately. So if this message resonated, if your body softened even a little, if something inside you whispered, "Yes, that's me," I invite you to stay connected. Leave a comment below with the word "receive" or simply share one feeling this message brought up for you. Your voice matters here. And someone else reading it may feel less alone because of you. If you feel called, subscribe and stay with this space. This is a place for Aquarians who value depth over noise, truth over performance, and healing that actually lasts. And most of all, trust yourself. Trust the quiet clarity you feel when something is aligned. Trust the moments of peace more than the moments of intensity. This journey isn't over. Another message is already forming. Another layer is waiting to be revealed. Until then, be gentle with your heart. Be honest with your boundaries. And remember, you were never meant to be chased. You were meant to be recognized. I'll meet you again soon.